On a warm August day in the year 12 CE, a child was born into the most powerful empire the world had ever seen. His name was Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, though history would remember him by a nickname given during his youth, Caligula, meaning little boots, a term of endearment from Roman soldiers who adored him. For a brief period, he was hailed as the Golden Prince of Rome. But the boy who once captured the hearts of the legions would later descend into madness, becoming one of history's most notorious rulers. Caligula was the son of Germanicus, a revered Roman general, and Agrippina the Elder, a prominent and influential noblewoman. As a child, he joined his father on military campaigns along the Rhine, dressed in a miniature soldier's outfit, hence the nickname. The troops saw him as a symbol of Rome's future, an heir to an empire that spanned from Britain's wilderness to Egypt's deserts. Tragedy struck early. In 19 CE, Germanicus died under suspicious circumstances, with rumours suggesting he was poisoned, possibly at the behest of Emperor Tiberius, his great-uncle. Regardless of the truth, Germanicus's death devastated the family. Agrippina clashed bitterly with Tiberius, and over time, Caligula's siblings and mother were either exiled or killed. Only he remained. Despite a traumatic youth, Caligula survived. He was sent to live with Tiberius on the island of Capri, where he was exposed to a world steeped in indulgence, suspicion, and political intrigue. The aging emperor had become reclusive and paranoid, surrounding himself with depravity. Caligula adapted to this environment, concealing his true feelings, charming those around him, and biding his time. In 37 CE, Tiberius died, and Caligula was declared the new emperor. His rise was met with celebration. Seen as the son of Germanicus and a symbol of renewal after the harsh rule of Tiberius, he quickly won the public's favor. He freed political prisoners, ended oppressive trials, and showered the populace with gifts, games, and festivities. A new era seemed to be dawning, but something changed. Within the first year of his reign, Caligula fell seriously ill. Some claimed it was a fever, others suggested poisoning. After recovering, he appeared transformed. The vibrant, benevolent ruler had vanished, replaced by a man gripped by delusion and cruelty. His reign soon became infamous for its excess and brutality. He depleted the state treasury on extravagant palaces and opulent celebrations. He declared himself a living god, ordering that temples display his image and demanding reverence from senators and citizens alike. His eccentricity and cruelty knew no bounds. He humiliated Rome's elite, allegedly replaced divine statues' heads with his own, and even contemplated naming his favorite horse, Incitatus, a consul. Whether sincere or satirical, the act highlighted his contempt for Rome's institutions. He ruled through fear, ordering executions at will, often for amusement. Friends, allies, and even family were not spared. After the death of his sister Drusilla, rumored to be the object of his unnatural affection, he had her deified. Those who displeased him faced torture, exile, or violent death, sometimes serving as entertainment in the arenas. Among his most bizarre acts was a supposed war on Neptune, the sea god. Believing himself a divine conqueror, he commanded his soldiers to march to the English Channel and gather seashells as spoils of victory. Rome looked on in disbelief. But tyranny built on fear is inherently unstable. As his behavior grew more erratic, so did opposition to his rule. The Praetorian Guard, his own protectors, finally turned against him. On January 24th, 41 CE, After less than 4 years in power, a group of guards ambushed him in a palace corridor. Surrounded and attacked, he was stabbed over 30 times and left to die. His wife and young daughter were also killed, eliminating any claim to succession. Thus ended the reign of Caligula, a leader once full of promise, ultimately consumed by madness. His legacy endured not as that of a hero, but as a cautionary tale of the dangers posed when unchecked power falls into the hands of the unstable. Rome struggled to comprehend the true nature of his actions. Was he truly insane, or was he merely testing the boundaries of a ruler's power? Some believed he suffered from an undiagnosed condition, possibly epilepsy, or a neurological disorder linked to an early illness. Others saw him as a living testament to absolute power, proof that even the greatest empire could be undone by the capricious desires of a single individual. Though his reign was brief, the legacy of his actions endured, and his name became synonymous with excess, cruelty, and madness. Over the centuries, writers, playwrights, and historians would recount his story as a cautionary tale about how unchecked power can transform even the most brilliant minds into monstrous figures. As you drift to sleep tonight, think of this tale not just as a narrative of insanity, but as a reminder that history is shaped by those who hold power, for better or worse. His reign may have ended in bloodshed, but his name echoes across time, a whisper from the past warning of what happens when an empire's fate rests in the hands of the unhinged. So, sleep well, knowing that even the most powerful rulers, if unchecked, may become mere shadows in history. In 937 CE, a boy named Octavianus was born into one of Rome's most influential families. His father, Alaric II of Spalato, was a dominant figure in the decaying remnants of the Holy Roman Empire. But young Octavianus was no warrior, scholar, or sage destined for greatness. Instead, he would be remembered as Pope John XII, the most notorious pope to ever sit upon the papal throne. This ruler would turn the Vatican's sacred halls into a den of indulgence and corruption. Born into privilege, Octavianus showed little interest in piety. His father ruled Rome with a firm hand, and as his death approached, he ensured his son would inherit not only wealth and power, but also the papacy itself. At the age of 18, Octavianus was elected Pope John XII, a decision more based on his family's political influence than any spiritual merit. Now a teenager, he occupied the highest religious office in Christendom. However, instead of showing humility, the Vatican was ruled by a reckless young man whose interests lay far from matters of faith. Upon becoming Pope in 955 CE, John XII transformed the papal palace into a court of sin. He surrounded himself with gamblers, pleasure-seekers, and courtesans, turning the holy sites of Rome into venues for his indulgences. It was said that the Vatican resembled a brothel more than a house of God. He discarded the decorum of the papacy in favor of scandalous excesses, even engaging in open sexual acts within the Vatican. It was rumored that he took lovers from both nuns and noble women, defiling sacred places with orgies. John XII's sins weren't confined to lust. He was also accused of simony, selling church offices to the highest bidder, and using the wealth of the church to fund his lavish lifestyle. He spent more time hunting, feasting, and drinking than tending to his religious duties, even gambling away church treasures for his own pleasure. The corruption became so blatant that even the most devout followers could no longer turn a blind eye. Whispers grew into public outcry. The Pope had become the personification of sin, His political incompetence only worsened matters. Desperate to retain power, he allied himself with Otto I, the King of Germany, crowning him Holy Roman Emperor in 962 CE. But almost immediately after Otto received the crown, John XII betrayed him, secretly siding with Otto's enemies. Otto, no fool, responded by marching on Rome in 963 CE, deposing John XII and replacing him with a more fitting pope. But John was not easily removed. He fled into exile only to return months later at the head of a rebellious force, reclaiming the Vatican through violence and intimidation. His brief return to power was marked by acts of vengeance, including mutilating and executing his enemies. However, his reign of terror would not last long. In May 964 CE, at the age of 27, he died suddenly under circumstances as scandalous as his life. Some claimed he was struck down by divine wrath, while others suggested he suffered a more earthly fate. A fatal stroke while committing adultery is one of the most widely spread rumors about his death. It is claimed that he was killed by the furious husband of one of his many lovers, caught in the act of betrayal. Regardless of the truth, his death came not in prayer or repentance, but in the shadow of sin, just as he had lived. Even in death, John XII left behind a legacy of disgrace. His reign marked one of the lowest points for the papacy, a time when the leader of the Christian world was little more than a drunken, lustful tyrant. Historians and theologians alike struggled to understand how such a man rose to power. His papacy became a cautionary tale, a warning of what happens when power is given to the undeserving. The Vatican, tarnished by his corruption, spent years attempting to erase the memory of his rule, but history would not forget. John XII became a symbol of the worst excesses of the papacy, a grim reminder that even the most sacred institutions are not immune to human vice. Let his story remind you, as you drift off to sleep, that even the holiest seat in Christendom was corrupted by sin under his rule. His name endures not as that of a saint, but as a warning. Remember that power, even in the hands of those meant to guide, can be corrupted beyond redemption. In 1166, in the halls of the Plantagenet dynasty, a child was born who would become one of England's most notorious rulers, King John. The youngest son of King Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine, John's early life was marked by neglect. Unlike his older brothers, renowned warriors and noblemen, John was given nothing to rule and was known as John Lackland. His brothers, Henry, Richard, and Geoffrey, overshadowed him in every way, leaving him with little. Yet John was ambitious. Though lacking the military skill of Richard or the charisma of Henry, he was cunning and willing to do anything for power. When his father died in 1189, the throne passed to Richard, the famous warrior king. While Richard embarked on the Crusades, John began plotting against him. He conspired with Philip II of France to seize the throne, but was exposed when Richard returned. Despite his betrayal, Richard showed mercy, a decision England would later regret. In 1199, when Richard died, John ascended to the throne, but he lacked the qualities of a great king. Where Richard had been fair, John was cruel. Where Richard had been brave, John was cowardly. His reign was marked by failure after failure, including a disastrous conflict with Philip II of France. John inherited an empire stretching from England to Normandy, Aquitaine, and Anjou, but his inability to defend it led to the loss of Normandy, a blow that earned him the contempt of his nobles and people. His response was to raise taxes, further straining the kingdom and leading to widespread unrest. In his desperation for funds, he extorted the clergy, stole from barons, and imprisoned those who opposed him. His rule, marked by greed and oppression, created enemies at every turn. John's thirst for power even extended to his own family. In 1203, he captured his young nephew Arthur of Brittany, the rightful heir to much of John's French territories. Fearing a challenge to his rule, John ordered Arthur's execution, a decision that shocked even his most loyal supporters. Rumours spread that John had murdered Arthur in a drunken rage and thrown his body into the River Seine. Whether or not John committed the act himself, Arthur was never seen again, and John's reputation was permanently stained by the murder of an innocent prince. As John's failures mounted, so did opposition to his rule. His oppressive taxation, military failures, and open corruption pushed the English barons to rebellion. In 1215, they forced John to the negotiating table, leading to the signing of the Magna Carta, one of the most significant documents in history. This charter limited the power of the monarchy and established the principle that even the king was subject to the law. Is this conversation helpful so far? The belief that kings were not above the law persisted, though John reluctantly signed it. He had no intention of honouring it and almost immediately began seeking ways to break his promises, which ultimately plunged England into civil war. John's response was as disastrous as ever. He burned towns, destroyed castles, and turned the country into a battleground. He even sought foreign mercenaries, hiring soldiers from Flanders and France to fight against his own people. But it was too late. By 1216, John's rule was collapsing. The French had invaded, the barons had rebelled, and England teetered on the brink of ruin. As he fled across the country, misfortune sealed his fate. While crossing the Wash, a dangerous marshland during a storm, he lost his royal treasure, including his crown jewels, to the sea, swallowed by the mud and tide. Broken, ill, and humiliated, John retreated to Newark Castle, where he died in October 1216 from dysentery, abandoned by his allies and despised by his people. Few mourned his passing. His own nobles had turned against him, and his reign had been one of cruelty, failure, and betrayal. However, in a strange twist, the very document he had signed in desperation, the Magna Carta, would survive him and change the world. Though John was reviled, the Magna Carta laid the foundation for constitutional government, influencing legal systems in England, America, and beyond. The tyrant who tried to defy the law became, unwillingly, the architect of a world where rulers were held accountable. As you rest tonight, think of King John, a ruler whose greed, cruelty, and incompetence nearly destroyed his kingdom. A man who murdered his own nephew, lost an empire, betrayed his people, and died hated by all. Yet his failure led to something greater, the birth of a system where kings could no longer rule unchecked. Sleep well, knowing that even the worst rulers can leave behind lessons that shape the future. Ivan the Terrible, the Tsar who ruled through fear, was born in 1530 under the gilded domes of Moscow. A child named Ivan Vasilievich would grow to become one of history's most notorious rulers. His early life was tragic. At just 3 years old, he became Grand Prince of Moscow after his father's sudden death. But Ivan was too young to rule alone. His mother, Eleanor Glenskaya, served as regent, but was poisoned when Ivan was only 8, leaving him vulnerable to power-hungry nobles. Growing up amid cruelty and intrigue, Ivan was often humiliated, starved, and neglected, forced to witness violence and betrayals at court. These years of torment shaped him, filling him with paranoia and a burning hatred for the boyars. Yet, Ivan was no ordinary child. He consumed books, especially religious texts and the histories of Rome and Byzantium, and saw himself as a divine ruler chosen by God to transform Russia into a mighty empire. In 1547, at the age of 16, Ivan took full control of Russia, declaring himself Tsar of all Rus, a title no ruler had claimed before. This was not mere vanity. By calling himself Tsar, he placed himself above the boyars, ruling not by their will but by divine right. His early reign showed promise with legal reforms, military strengthening, and the creation of a standing army, the Streltsy. He modernized Russia's administration, reducing the power of corrupt nobles and centralizing control. He expanded Russia's borders, conquering the Tatar Khanates of Kazan and Astrakhan, securing vast territories and access to the Caspian Sea. However, beneath this facade of progress, Ivan's demons began to manifest. His paranoia deepened, his cruelty increased, and his reign darkened with each passing year. In 1560, tragedy struck when Anastasia Romanova, Ivan's beloved wife, died suddenly, likely poisoned by the boyars. Devastated, Ivan spiraled into grief and madness, convinced that his nobles were conspiring against him, his trust in anyone shattered. In 1565, Ivan unleashed his wrath by creating the Oprichnina, a state within a state, ruled by his personal army, the Oprichniki. These men, dressed in black and bearing the symbols of a dog's head and a broom, representing the hunting of traitors and sweeping away enemies, became instruments of terror. What followed was a reign of brutality and bloodshed. The boyar families were purged, their lands and wealth confiscated. Thousands were arrested, tortured, and executed on Ivan's orders, some impaled, others torn apart by wild dogs. Cities that resisted him were destroyed. The first of these horrors occurred in 1570 when Ivan turned his wrath upon Novgorod. Once a loyal city, Novgorod became the target of Ivan's wrath when he believed it was sheltering traitors. His army stormed the city, massacring tens of thousands, men, women, and children alike. The streets were awash with blood, and the Volkhov River was filled with bodies. Such terror had never been witnessed in Russia. Over the years, Ivan's paranoia deepened, and he began seeing enemies everywhere, even among his own family. In 1581, during a fit of uncontrollable rage, Ivan struck his son and heir, Ivan Ivanovich, with an iron-tipped staff, fatally injuring him. As his son lay dying in his arms, Ivan realized too late the depth of his madness. He had killed the one person capable of continuing his legacy. This tragedy devastated him. With no heir left to claim the throne, Ivan's death in 1584 plunged Russia into chaos. Some say he died of a stroke, others whisper of poison. His final moments were spent playing chess, a game of strategy and deception much like his life. Russia, now in disarray, entered the time of troubles, a period marked by political instability. Without Ivan's iron rule, rival factions fought for power, and foreign invaders took advantage of the turmoil. It would take decades for Russia to recover from the wounds of his reign. Was Ivan truly terrible, or was he simply a product of his time, a man of cruelty ruling in an age of brutality? He expanded the Russian Empire, strengthened its military, and yet also brought unspeakable suffering to his own people. He saw himself as a divine warrior, yet his rule brought only chaos and pain. His reign is a paradox, a mixture of triumph and horror, ambition and madness. The foundations he laid would later help build Russia under the Romanovs, but at a staggering cost of bloodshed. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine the snow-covered streets of Moscow, the cold wind whispering of the past. Picture the black-cloaked oprichniki galloping through the night, their torches flickering like phantom lights. Even the terrible ruled through fear, and though he has long since passed, his shadow still looms in history. On a cool spring day in 1367, in the grand halls of Bordeaux, a prince was born who would one day become the King of England. His name was Richard of Bordeaux, the son of the valiant Black Prince and the grandson of the powerful Edward III. He was born into an England of chivalry, war, and grandeur, but his reign would be one of betrayal, tyranny, and decline. King Richard II would not be remembered as a warrior king like his father, nor as a builder of empires like his grandfather. History would remember him as the king who lost his throne. Richard's tragedy began early with the death of his father when Richard was just 10 years old. The boy, who was never meant to be king, suddenly found himself heir to one of the most powerful thrones in Europe. When Edward III died in 1377, the 10-year-old Richard ascended to the throne. Too young to rule on his own, the kingdom was governed by powerful nobles, particularly his uncle, John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster. But as Richard grew older, he became determined to rule independently, free from the control of the nobles who had dominated his childhood. In 1381, just 4 years into his reign, England was thrown into the peasants' revolt, driven by anger over high taxes, feudal oppression, and economic hardship. The rebels, led by Wat Tyler, stormed London, burning buildings and executing officials. In the midst of this chaos, Richard made an extraordinary move. He rode directly into the rebel camp and, with a calm and fearless demeanor, promised reforms to the peasants and convinced them to disperse. However, his promises were soon broken, and brutal retribution followed. This moment revealed that Richard was not just a puppet king. He had courage, but as he grew older, his rule became defined not by bravery, but by vengeance and paranoia. Believing firmly in his divine right to rule, he came to despise the noblemen who had advised him in his youth. He surrounded himself with favorites, trusted men to whom he gave titles, wealth, and power. This alienated the barons of England, who formed an alliance against Richard. In 1387, the Lords Appellant, led by the Duke of Gloucester, seized control of the government and executed many of Richard's favoured men. Humiliated and powerless, Richard was forced to submit, a bitter experience he never forgot. But Richard was not one to forgive. In 1397, a decade after his humiliation, he struck back with vengeance, arresting the Lords Appellant and punishing his enemies. Exiling some and executing others, he governed with total authority, suppressing his foes and silencing dissent. Parliament became an extension of his will, and he proclaimed himself above the law. He imposed heavy taxes on England to support his extravagant court and ambitious constructions, including a splendid palace at Sheen. Unlike his warrior forebears, he favoured art, ceremony, and poetry, seeing himself as a divine ruler chosen by God, beyond the reach of ordinary men. But unchecked power invites enemies. His pride, brutality, and relentless ambition alienated his own subjects. The nobles who once feared him began to conspire against him. His most grievous error was his treatment of Henry Bolingbroke, son of John of Gaunt. In 1398, he exiled Henry for 10 years over a minor quarrel. When Gaunt died in 1399, he seized his lands instead of allowing Henry to inherit them. This proved disastrous. Enraged, Henry returned with an army. What began as a bid to reclaim his inheritance grew into open rebellion. Disillusioned with their ruler, the barons and people sided with Henry. Confident in his invincibility, the king had gone on campaign in Ireland. By the time he returned, he found the kingdom had turned on him. In August 1399, he was captured and imprisoned in the Tower of London. In September, isolated and disgraced, he was compelled to abdicate, ceding the crown to Henry Bolingbroke, who became King Henry IV. He was transferred to Pontefract Castle, a cold and desolate prison. His final days remain mysterious. Some claim he starved, others say he was murdered at Henry's command. He died in February 1400. His burial was quiet, and his legacy became a cautionary tale, a monarch brought down by vanity, favoritism, and vengeance. Though his reign ended in shame, his story lived on through literature. Shakespeare portrayed him as a tragic figure in Richard II, a man undone by his belief in his own invulnerability. His downfall signaled the weakening of the once dominant Plantagenet line and foreshadowed the Wars of the Roses, where rival noble houses battled for the throne. Now, as night falls, picture the silent halls of Westminster and the empty golden throne. Remember the king who chose poetry over politics, beauty over battle, and believed power had no bounds, only to discover that every ruler, no matter how grand, must face judgment. Mary Stuart was born on a cold December night in 1542 at Linlithgow Palace, destined to hold 2 crowns. From her first breath, her life was shaped by ambition, power, and sorrow. She became Queen of Scots just 6 days after birth, when her father, King James V, died. Too young to grasp her role or defend her throne, she inherited a kingdom steeped in clan rivalries and constant strife. To shield her from England's King Henry VIII, who wanted to wed her to his son Edward, she was sent to France at age 5. There, in the refined court of King Henry II, she grew up as a royal betrothed to the Dauphin, Francis. At 16, she married him, and within a year they ruled France together. But their reign was brief. Francis died unexpectedly in 1560, leaving Mary widowed at 18. Without a place in France and drawn back to her birthplace, she returned to Scotland to claim her throne. But the nation she came back to was changed, divided by religious conflict and dominated by powerful nobles. A Catholic queen in a Protestant land, Mary was increasingly isolated. Her rule was marred by turmoil, but her gravest error was her choice in a husband. Seeking strength, she married her cousin, Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, a dashing noble who soon revealed himself as a drunken, jealous tyrant. His suspicion turned deadly in 1566, when he and his allies murdered Mary's secretary, David Rizzio, while she was pregnant. The union quickly collapsed. The following year, Darnley was found dead in the gardens of Kirkhope Field, the victim of a dark and tangled plot. Do you like this personality? After his house was destroyed, the chief suspect became Mary's new favourite, the ambitious and dangerous James Herne, Earl of Bothwell. Within weeks, Mary married Bothwell, a decision that shocked Scotland. Some believed she loved him, while others claimed she was forced into the marriage. Regardless of the truth, the public turned against her. the Scottish nobles rebelled, forcing Mary to abdicate in favour of her infant son, James VI. Betrayed, imprisoned, and stripped of her power, Mary fled to England seeking protection from her cousin, Queen Elizabeth. However, Elizabeth, always wary of rivals, saw Mary as a threat rather than a guest. For 19 years, Mary remained a prisoner in England, moving between castles, a queen in name only. She wrote letters, plotted escapes, and tried to gain support. But with each passing year, her hope faded, and Elizabeth's patience wore thin. In 1586, Mary was implicated in the Babington plot, a conspiracy to assassinate Elizabeth and place Mary on the English throne. Whether she was truly involved or just a pawn in a larger game, it made no difference. Elizabeth signed her death warrant. On February 8, 1587, in the cold halls of Fotheringhay Castle, Mary faced her fate. Dressed in red, the colour of Catholic martyrdom, she climbed the scaffold with composure and dignity. She forgave her executioners, prayed for Scotland and England, and placed her head on the block. The first blow missed, the second struck, but didn't sever the neck, and the third blow ended her life. The executioner lifted her head for all to see, but in a cruel twist, her red wig came off, revealing her thin grey hair from years of suffering. Though she died a traitor in England, Mary's bloodline held power. Her son, James VI of Scotland, would eventually become James I of England, uniting both crowns under one monarch. In death, the very union Elizabeth had sought to control was achieved. Mary's story is one of beauty and betrayal, power and downfall. She was a queen destined to fall, her life marked by a struggle for a throne she never truly held, her fate sealed by the men around her, and her legacy forever tied to the blood-stained pages of history. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine Mary in her final moments, a queen without a crown, a woman who played the greatest game and lost. Her voice, though silenced in life, still lingers as a whisper from the past. So, sleep well, dear dreamer, and remember that power once lost can never be fully reclaimed. Emperor Rudolph II, the mad emperor of magic and melancholy, was born into the mighty Habsburg dynasty on a cold winter night in 1552 in Vienna. His name was Rudolph, and he was destined to wear the crown of the Holy Roman Empire. However, unlike his warrior ancestors and calculating statesman forebearers, Rudolph II would not be remembered for his conquests or governance. Instead, he would be known as the Mad Emperor, a ruler who lost himself in alchemy, astrology, and the occult, while his empire slipped away. Raised in the glittering courts of Spain under the strict influence of his devout uncle, King Philip II, Rudolph grew up in a world of rigid Catholic discipline and political order. But Rudolph was different, quiet, introspective, and drawn not to war and politics but to art, mysticism, and the unknown. From a young age, he suffered from bouts of melancholy, or what we now call depression, and was plagued by paranoia and indecision. While his tutors prepared him for rulership, his heart was drawn elsewhere, to the stars, the strange and forbidden books of alchemists, and the wonders of the natural world. At the age of 24, in 1576, Rudolph was crowned Holy Roman Emperor, ruling over vast lands from Austria and Bohemia to the far reaches of the empire. However, instead of focusing on his political responsibilities, Rudolph transformed his court in Prague into a sanctuary of secrets. He made his palace a haven for magicians, scientists, and alchemists, collecting rare artifacts, strange machines, and ancient manuscripts. His obsession with the occult became legendary, and Prague became the most mysterious city in Europe. Rudolf gathered some of the greatest minds of the time: Johannes Kepler, the brilliant mathematician and astronomer; Tycho Brahe, the visionary Danish stargazer; Edward Kelly, the alchemist and supposed communicator with angels; and John Dee, the enigmatic scholar who claimed to hold the key to the supernatural. While the rest of Europe waged wars and built empires, Rudolf's court became a laboratory of dreams and nightmares, where alchemists sought the philosopher's stone, astrologers read the fates of kings, and inventors constructed strange contraptions in pursuit of eternal wisdom. But while Rudolf was consumed by his pursuits, his empire faltered. He sequestered himself in his towers of wonder, and as he did, his empire began to crumble. He neglected diplomacy, allowing his nobles to act with impunity, and ignored the growing religious tensions between Catholics and Protestants, which would eventually ignite the 30 Years' War. His mental state deteriorated, and he grew increasingly paranoid, convinced that he was surrounded by traitors and spies. He refused to marry, leaving no heir, further destabilizing the future of the Habsburg dynasty. His behavior became erratic. He withdrew from public life, suffered from prolonged periods of isolation, and engaged in strange rituals, believing he was on the verge of unlocking the universe's secrets. By 1605, his enemies had had enough. His younger brother, backed by the powerful Habsburg nobles, turned against him. Rudolf, once the most powerful man in Christendom, found himself imprisoned in his own castle, stripped of his lands and authority. In 1611 he was forced to abdicate, and Matthias ascended to the throne. The once glorious court of Prague, with its scholars, sorcerers, and visionaries, was dismantled. The emperor, broken and abandoned, spent his final months wandering through his vast collection of art and relics, speaking to the ghosts of a past that no longer existed. On January 20th, 1612, Rudolf II died alone in his castle. No grand ceremonies were held, and his empire moved on without him, leaving behind the shattered remnants of his dreams of alchemy, immortality, and lost knowledge. Despite his reign's failure, Rudolf left behind something invaluable. He preserved knowledge, nurtured great minds, and gathered thinkers who shaped his era. Without his patronage, Kepler might not have revolutionized astronomy, and the spirit of the Renaissance might have faded too soon. Even in his madness, he was a man who dared to dream and sought to unlock the secrets of the universe. Though his empire crumbled, his legacy lived on in science, art, and the eternal pursuit of knowledge. As you drift to sleep tonight, imagine the halls of Prague Castle, where candlelight flickers across strange machines and unread tomes. Picture the emperor, lost in his world of symbols and secrets, chasing the impossible while his kingdom fell apart around him. So sleep well, dear dreamer, and remember that the greatest minds are often the most troubled, and those who seek the universe's secrets may be consumed by them. On a distant island in the warm waters of the Indian Ocean, a girl was born who would one day rule Madagascar with an iron fist. Her name was Ranavalona, and she would become one of the most feared and controversial rulers in the history of the island. To some, she was a defender of her people's sovereignty, protecting them from European colonial encroachment. To others, she was a ruthless tyrant, her reign marked by bloodshed. Ranavalona was not born into royalty. She was the daughter of a man who helped expose a plot against the reigning king Andriana Poemarina, the great unifier of Madagascar. In gratitude, the king adopted her into the royal family and arranged her marriage to his son Radama, the future king of Madagascar. When Radama ascended the throne in 1810, Madagascar began to open its doors to European influence. Christian missionaries arrived, schools were established, and trade flourished. However, not everyone welcomed these changes, especially Ranavalona, who saw the foreigners as invaders rather than allies. When Radama died in 1828, a power struggle ensued. Although tradition dictated that one of Radama's nephews should inherit the throne, Ranavalona had other plans. With the support of powerful military leaders, she seized the throne, swiftly executing those who opposed her. The commoner's daughter had become Queen Ranavalona I. Once in power, she wasted no time in reversing her husband's policies. She expelled Christian missionaries, outlawed European customs, and banned the teaching of foreign languages, seeing Christianity as a tool of colonialism that threatened her rule and Madagascar's traditions. Her reign became infamous for its brutality. Suspected traitors, Christian converts, and political enemies were subjected to the Tangina ordeal, a deadly trial by poison. Those who survived were deemed innocent, while those who died were declared guilty. Whole communities were massacred for resisting her, and tens of thousands were killed in purges or died from forced labor. Despite her cruelty, Ranavalona proved to be a shrewd strategist, successfully fending off European powers at a time when much of Africa was falling to colonialism. The French and British tried repeatedly to overthrow her, but she outmaneuvered them at every turn. In 1845, the French and British navies launched a combined attack on Madagascar, determined to end her reign, but Ranavalona was ready. Through her powerful army and deep knowledge of the land, she managed to defeat the invading forces, solidifying her position on the throne. Madagascar remained independent, untouched by colonial forces for over 30 years. Ranavalona ruled with unquestionable authority, but by the 1860s, her health began to deteriorate. She outlived her rivals, enemies, and many of her advisors. In 1861, after 33 years of reign, she passed away peacefully in her sleep. An unexpected and serene end for a queen whose rule had been anything but tranquil. Her death was met with mixed emotions. Some mourned her as a patriot who had defended Madagascar's sovereignty against overwhelming odds, while others saw it as the end of a tyrannical reign. Her son, Radama II, soon reversed many of her policies, opening Madagascar to the outside world. But his reign was brief, and the island's future remained uncertain. Eventually, European powers would take control, but Ranavalona had held them off longer than anyone expected. To this day, she remains one of history's most complex and debated figures. Was she a ruthless tyrant driven by paranoia, or a visionary who fought against imperialism? Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, imagine the stone walls of her palace in Antananarivo, where a queen ruled with an iron fist, where loyalty and betrayal hung by a razor-thin thread. Rest well, dreamer, and remember, power is always a double-edged sword, and history is rarely as simple as it seems. In the cold of an April morning in 1835, in the grand palaces of Brussels, a future tyrant was born. His name was Leopold, and though he would become the King of Belgium, his ambitions extended far beyond its borders. By the end of his reign, millions would be dead, and an empire built on cruelty would fall, leaving his name forever tarnished by blood. Leopold grew up in a small but prosperous Belgium, which had only gained independence in 1830, and his monarchy was still young. However, he wasn't content with ruling such a modest nation. He looked beyond Europe, specifically to Africa, where other powers were carving out vast empires. Leopold wanted one of his own. When he ascended to the throne in 1865, he realized that Belgium could not afford a large empire, so he devised a cunning plan. He would claim a colony for himself. In 1876, he founded the International African Association, presenting it as a charitable organization dedicated to bringing civilization to Africa. He promised European leaders that his goal was to end slavery and improve the lives of Africans, a complete fabrication. Through manipulation, bribes, and deceit, Leopold seized control of the Congo in 1885, declaring it his personal property under the name the Congo Free State. It was not a Belgian colony, but a vast personal empire, far larger than Belgium itself, where Leopold ruled not as a king, but as an absolute master. The Congo under Leopold was far from a land of civilization. It became a place of brutality, slavery, and greed. The region was rich in rubber, a valuable resource that was in high demand due to the Industrial Revolution. Leopold seized this opportunity to amass immense wealth. Instead of paying workers, he enslaved the Congolese population. Villages were forced to gather rubber under horrific conditions, and those who failed to meet quotas or resisted were subjected to torture, mutilation, or execution. The severing of hands became one of the most notorious punishments, with soldiers required to collect the severed hands of victims as proof they hadn't wasted bullets. Entire villages were wiped out, and millions of Congolese people died under Leopold's rule. Estimates suggest at least 10 million, more than half the population. For years, Leopold managed to hide the true horrors behind a veneer of propaganda, presenting himself as a benevolent ruler bringing civilization to Africa. Meanwhile, he funded lavish public projects in Belgium and was adored by his European subjects, who remained unaware of the atrocities he was committing in Africa. But eventually the truth emerged. Journalists and missionaries, including Edmund Dean Morel and Roger Casement, exposed the brutality, and photographs of mutilated Congolese people spread across Europe. Public outrage mounted, and under intense international pressure, Leopold was forced to relinquish control of the Congo to Belgium in 1908. But by then, the damage had been done. The scars of Leopold's reign would never heal. Leopold's actions could never be fully forgiven, as he showed no remorse for his deeds. He had amassed vast wealth, and as he lay dying in 1909, surrounded by luxury, he ordered all records of his reign in the Congo to be destroyed, hoping to erase his crimes from history. However, the world did not forget. Today, Leopold II is remembered not as a great monarch, but as a butcher, a man who transformed a nation into a labor camp and ruled with brutal cruelty. Though Belgium would continue its rule over the Congo for many years, the terror of Leopold's reign left an indelible wound that never healed. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine the silent forests of the Congo, where a dark history still lingers, and the echoes of those who suffered, whose voices were silenced but never erased. Leopold II thought he could bury the truth, but history remembers. Rest peacefully, knowing that power, when driven by greed and cruelty, leaves not greatness, but shadows that never fade. History, much like the night sky, is a blend of darkness and light. We've traversed the shadows cast by the worst rulers, those who governed through cruelty, greed, and folly. But do not fear, for even the longest night eventually gives way to dawn. Now let us turn to a different kind of story, one shaped by wisdom, courage, and justice, a story where true leaders leave legacies of hope and prove that power, when used wisely, can change the world for the better. Let us journey through the life and legacy of Alexander the Great, the conqueror who dared to dream beyond the known world and shape the course of history. Born in 356 BC in Pella, the ancient capital of Macedonia, Alexander was the son of King Philip II, a brilliant military leader who united the Greek city-states under Macedonian rule, and Queen Olympias, a passionate woman who believed Alexander was destined for greatness. She told him his lineage traced back to Achilles, the hero of the Trojan War. From an early age, Alexander displayed exceptional intelligence, courage, and ambition. At 13, he was tutored by Aristotle, one of the greatest philosophers of all time, developing a deep appreciation for philosophy, science, and literature. But his heart burned with a desire for conquest. At just 16 years old, Alexander led his first military campaign, crushing a rebellion and founding his first city, Alexandropolis. His father, proud of his accomplishments, declared, "Macedonia is too small for you." Indeed, Alexander's ambitions would reach far beyond his homeland. In 336 BC, after his father was assassinated, Alexander ascended to the throne. To secure his rule, he swiftly eliminated rivals, showing both cunning and resolve. With Greece under his control, he turned eastward toward the mighty Persian Empire. Before setting out, he consulted the Oracle of Delphi, where the priestess declared him invincible. With this divine prophecy fueling his confidence, Alexander began his remarkable campaign. In 334 BC, he crossed into Asia Minor with a powerful army of Macedonians and Greeks. His forces achieved a decisive victory at the Battle of Granicus, opening the path to Asia. His most famous battle came in 331 BC at Gaugamela, where he faced the Persian king Darius III. Outnumbered, Alexander used brilliant tactics and led a daring cavalry charge that shattered the Persian forces. Darius fled, and Alexander was crowned king of Asia. Afterward, he triumphantly entered Babylon, celebrated as a liberator, and continued his conquest of Persia, capturing cities like Susa and Persepolis, amassing great wealth. He famously burned the Persian royal palace, symbolizing the end of Persian dominance. In 332 BC, Alexander marched into Egypt, where he was hailed as a liberator from Persian rule. In the ancient city of Memphis, he was crowned pharaoh and visited the oracle of Siwa, where he was proclaimed the son of Zeus Ammon, solidifying his divine status. Inspired by his vision of a united empire, he founded Alexandria on the Mediterranean coast, a city destined to become a cultural and intellectual center. Continuing eastward, Alexander crossed the Hindu Kush and entered India in 326 BC. At the Battle of the Hydaspes River, he faced King Porus, who fought with war elephants. It was one of his toughest battles, but Alexander emerged victorious, so impressed by Porus's bravery that he made him an ally. His admiration for formidable foes was evident, yet at the edge of the world his troops grew fatigued after years of unyielding campaigning. They refused to advance any further, and Alexander reluctantly agreed to head back, leading his army through the grueling Gedrosian desert, where many perished from dehydration and exhaustion. In 323 BC, at the age of 32, Alexander fell ill in Babylon. While some believed it was a fever, others suspected poisoning. On his deathbed, his generals asked whom he wished to leave his empire to, and he answered, "To the strongest." With these words, he became a legend. His passing left a vast empire without a leader, sparking decades of conflict known as the Wars of the Diadochi. His generals divided the empire into separate kingdoms, but Alexander's legacy endured. He profoundly transformed the world, spreading Greek culture across 3 continents, from Egypt to India, creating the Hellenistic civilization that blended Greek, Persian, Egyptian, and Indian influences. His city, Alexandria, became a hub of learning, home to the famous Library of Alexandria. His influence inspired many leaders, from Julius Caesar to Napoleon, who sought to replicate his conquests. His legend grew with each generation, cementing his place as the greatest general in history. As we conclude our journey through his world, reflect on the man who dared to conquer the earth. He once said, "There is nothing impossible for him who will try." His legacy lies not only in the lands he ruled, but in the dreams he ignited. May his spirit guide your own dreams tonight, filling them with ambition, courage, and the relentless pursuit of greatness. Julius Caesar, the man who shaped Rome, also left a lasting legacy. His ambition, genius, and courage transformed Rome from a republic into an empire, marked by military triumphs, political intrigue, and a tragic end that resonates through history. Close your eyes and enter a world of power and glory, where destiny is shaped by daring dreams and decisive actions. Born in 100 BC to the influential Julii family, claiming descent from Venus, Caesar was taught from a young age that greatness was his destiny. Despite his family's waning influence and Rome's political unrest, he rose to prominence. At 16, after his father's death, he became head of his family and navigated the political challenges of Rome with cunning and charm. At 18, Caesar defied the dictator Sulla by refusing to divorce his wife, Cornelia, putting his life in danger. Sulla spared him, but warned that Caesar had many Mariuses in him, a prophecy of his future power. To avoid further persecution, Caesar joined the military, demonstrating exceptional bravery and earning the civic crown, Rome's highest military honor. Returning to Rome, he used his charisma to climb the political ladder, becoming a lawyer known for his oratory skills and winning public favor with lavish events. His political alliances were strategic, forming a powerful triad with Crassus, Rome's wealthiest man, and Pompey, a celebrated general. Together they dominated Roman politics through the first triumvirate, though rivalry and ambition simmered beneath the surface. In 58 BC, Caesar became governor of Gaul, where his military brilliance led to vast territorial conquests. His campaigns, legendary for their daring and success, included the building of bridges across the Rhine and an invasion of Britain. His victory at Alesia was monumental, defeating the formidable Gallic tribes. His commentaries on the Gallic Wars showcased not only his strategic brilliance, but also his skill in propaganda. As Caesar's power grew, it alarmed his political rivals, especially Pompey, who turned against him. In 49 BC, the Senate, influenced by Pompey, ordered Caesar to disband his army. Defying them, Caesar crossed the Rubicon River with his legions, famously declaring the die is cast. This act of rebellion ignited a civil war. With unmatched speed and strategy, Caesar pursued Pompey across Greece, Egypt, and Africa. ultimately defeating his forces at the Battle of Pharsalus, consolidating his control over Rome. In Egypt, he became entangled with the young queen Cleopatra, forming a political and romantic alliance. Upon returning to Rome, Caesar was declared dictator for life, instituting sweeping reforms including the Julian calendar, economic relief, and the expansion of citizenship. His vision was to centralize power, end the chaos of the Republic, and strengthen Rome, but his growing power ignited fear and distrust, rivalry festered among senators who viewed him as a despot, upending their time-honored Republican authority, and they plotted to topple him on March 15th, 44 BC, the Ides of March. Caesar, unsuspecting, entered the Senate surrounded by conspirators and was stabbed 23 times. Among his assailants stood Brutus, in whom he had placed immense trust. According to legend, his final utterances were "Et tu, Brute," before collapsing at the foot of Pompey's statue. His death marked the Republic's demise, plunging Rome into turmoil and civil war. The ensuing power vacuum allowed his heir, Octavian, later Augustus, to become Rome's first emperor, inaugurating the empire. Caesar's impact reached far beyond his life. He expanded Rome's borders, laid the groundwork for imperial governance, and overhauled political, social, and economic systems. His name became synonymous with authority, inspiring titles from Caesar for later Roman rulers to Tsar in Russia and Kaiser in Germany. His story has been immortalized in literature, art, and drama, most famously in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, while his military and political methods continue to inform leaders and strategists. As we bid farewell to Caesar's world, recall his own words, Veni, Vidi, Vici, I came, I saw, I conquered, and let his enduring legacy inspire bold ambition and the will to shape one's destiny. Ramses II, known to history as Ramses the Great, ruled Egypt with unmatched power and splendor. Born in 1303 BC to Pharaoh Seti I and Queen Tuya, during the 19th dynasty, he trained under his father, joining military campaigns and mastering leadership. At 14, he became co-regent, learning statecraft, warfare, and diplomacy, until Seti's death thrust him onto the throne as the living Horus. His 66-year reign is among the longest in Egyptian history, defined by prosperity, monumental building, and legendary feats. A fearless commander, Ramses secured Egypt's frontiers and expanded its influence. His greatest military achievement was the Battle of Kadesh against the Hittites in 1274 BC, a colossal chariot clash by the Orontes River. Ambushed early on, he rallied his forces, turned the tide, and later proclaimed a resounding victory. To commemorate it, he commissioned grand reliefs at Ramesseum and Abu Simbel, immortalizing his heroism. The subsequent Treaty of Kadesh established decades of peace and diplomatic ties with the Hittites. Ramses II's architectural legacy endures across Egypt. He sculpted the rock-cut temple at Abu Simbel, its entrance flanked by 4 towering statues of himself and aligned so the rising sun twice a year illuminates its inner sanctuary. At Thebes, he built the Ramesseum, a vast mortuary complex festooned with colossal statues and ornate halls, and completed his father's projects at Abydos. Each structure was designed to defy time, ensuring his name would live on forever. Beyond conquest and construction, Ramses was a devoted husband and father. Though he had many wives and consorts, his chief queen, Nefertari, remained the beloved centerpiece of his life. He dedicated the Temple of Hathor at Abu Simbel to her, commemorating her beauty, wisdom, and grace in poetry and art. He fathered over 100 children, ensuring his dynasty's continuation, and appointed his sons to prominent military and administrative roles, securing both his legacy and the stability of his empire. His devotion to family and nation earned him the title the Great Ancestor, revered as the father of his people. He proclaimed himself a living god, worshipped alongside the supreme deity, and aligned himself with Horus, the god of kingship, and Osiris, the god of the afterlife. His image appeared on temples and statues across Egypt, symbolizing his divine authority. He was depicted wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, uniting his domain under his rule. Through religious reforms, he promoted his own worship and revitalized ancient temples, strengthening his divine status, which solidified his power and legitimacy. His 66-year reign brought peace, prosperity, and monumental achievements, marking the height of Egypt's power and cultural influence, known as its Golden Age. He died at 90, and his mummified body was laid to rest in the Valley of the Kings, with a tomb adorned to reflect his grandeur and divine journey to the afterlife. His mummy, discovered in 1881, now rests in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, his face preserved for eternity. His legacy endures through his monumental architecture, military victories, and lasting influence on Egyptian culture and religion. He became a symbol of power, inspiring rulers and storytellers alike. As our journey through his world ends, remember the pharaoh who built an empire of stone. His words, "I am Ramses, ruler of rulers, look on my works, ye mighty," and despair, capture his enduring legacy. Let his spirit guide your dreams, filling them with courage and ambition to leave your mark on the world. Sweet dreams, traveler of historical wonders. Genghis Khan, the conqueror of empires, united the tribes of the steppes and created the largest contiguous empire the world has ever known. His story is one of survival, strategy, and determination, a tale of a man who rose from hardship to reshape history. Born as Temujin in 1162 near the Onon River in the harsh Mongolian steppes, his father, Yesugai, was a tribal chief, but his power was fragile, upheld only by alliances. When Temujin was just 9 years old, his father was poisoned by a rival tribe, leaving his family vulnerable and destitute. Abandoned by his clan, young Temujin faced starvation and danger, learning to survive in the wilderness. Captured and enslaved by a rival tribe, he escaped with sheer will, vowing never to be helpless again. These early struggles shaped his relentless drive for power and unity. Temujin began gathering loyal followers from different tribes suffering under fragmented rule, and his vision was clear: a united Mongol nation built on loyalty and merit, not bloodlines. He married Berta, who became his lifelong companion and political ally. When she was kidnapped by a rival tribe, Temujin, with the help of his blood brother Jamuka, launched a daring rescue. However, their alliance eventually soured, culminating in a fierce battle in which Temujin emerged victorious. Jamuka, though offered mercy, chose an honorable death rather than serve the man who had surpassed him. With his rival defeated, Temujin was declared Genghis Khan, the universal ruler, uniting the Mongol tribes. He revolutionized Mongol society, abolishing inherited aristocratic titles and promoting individuals based on loyalty and merit. He established the Yasa, a strict code of laws emphasizing discipline, loyalty, and justice. He reorganized his army into efficient units with unparalleled discipline and mastery of archery and horseback riding. His forces became known for their mobility and ferocity. He also created a communication network, the Yam, ensuring swift communication across his empire. Trade routes were protected, fostering commerce and cultural exchange. Genghis Khan's ambition knew no bounds, and in 1206 he began his conquest of the Western Shia kingdom, swiftly defeating them and securing his western border. His next target was the powerful Jin dynasty in northern China, which he conquered with unmatched military tactics. Psychological warfare, espionage, and brilliant strategies fueled his rise as an unstoppable conqueror, and Genghis Khan's reputation spread rapidly. However, his wrath was unforgiving, especially when the Khwarezmian Empire of Persia executed his envoys, prompting him to unleash his fury on them. He destroyed entire cities, leaving a path of devastation, but spared artisans and scholars, understanding their worth to his empire. His forces marched across Central Asia, reaching as far as the Caspian Sea, with no army able to withstand his strategic genius and relentless ambition. Despite his fearsome image, Genghis Khan was a visionary leader who promoted religious tolerance, allowing his people to follow their beliefs freely. He aimed to unify his empire not only through military power, but also through governance and laws. He abolished torture, introduced a fair tax system, and ensured the prosperity of his people. Recognizing the value of knowledge, he invited scholars and engineers to his court, encouraging the exchange of ideas between East and West. Under his rule, the Silk Road flourished, connecting Europe and Asia, ushering in a golden age of trade and cultural exchange. In 1226, Genghis Khan launched his final campaign against the rebellious Shah of Khwarezm. Despite his age, he led his forces with unyielding vigor. It is said that he was injured during the battle, but continued to fight, driven by his indomitable spirit. In 1227, Genghis Khan passed away under mysterious circumstances. Some believe it was due to his wounds, others claim illness. His burial site remains undiscovered, hidden in a secret location. Before his death, he divided his empire among his sons, ensuring its continuity. His descendants expanded the empire, creating the largest land empire in history, spanning from China to Europe. Genghis Khan's impact on history is immense. He united the Mongol tribes, built an empire that transformed global trade, and facilitated cultural exchanges across continents. Despite his ruthless conquests, he laid the groundwork for modern civilization by fostering tolerance, diplomacy, and the rule of law. His military strategies continue to be studied by military leaders, and his name became synonymous with power and ambition. His descendants spread across nations, with some estimates suggesting that 1 in every 200 men alive today carries his genetic legacy. As our exploration of Genghis Khan's world concludes, let us reflect on the man who united the steppes and conquered empires. He once claimed, "I am the punishment of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." His legacy lives on not only in the lands he conquered, but also in the spirit of unity, an ambition that still inspires people today. Let his spirit guide your dreams, filling them with courage, vision, and the will to overcome all obstacles. Now we turn to the story of Ashoka the Great, the emperor, who embraced peace. His journey from ruthless conqueror to compassionate ruler is a tale of redemption and enlightenment, a story of a man who chose peace over violence, and whose message of tolerance still resonates today. Close your eyes and step into the ancient world of monumental pillars and the transformation of a king who became a beacon of wisdom. Ashoka was born in 304 BC into the Maurya dynasty, the grandson of Chandragupta Maurya, the founder of the vast Mauryan Empire. His father, Emperor Bindusara, ruled much of India, but Ashoka was not his favoured son. Overlooked and ignored, young Ashoka grew up determined to prove his worth. A trained warrior, he was known for his bravery, intelligence, and strategic brilliance, but also for his ruthless ambition. After quelling a revolt in Taxila with extreme efficiency, he earned the nickname Chand Ashoka, or Ashoka the Fierce. When his father passed away, a brutal battle for succession ensued. Ashoka emerged victorious, ascending to the throne of the Mauryan Empire. To secure his rule, he eliminated all potential rivals, consolidating his power through fear and force. His ambitions knew no limits, and he turned his attention to the neighboring kingdom of Kalinga. In 261 BC, Ashoka launched a devastating invasion of Kalinga, the only kingdom in India that resisted Mauryan rule. The war was brutal, and although Ashoka's forces emerged victorious, the cost was staggering. Over 100,000 soldiers and civilians were killed, and 150,000 were captured. The sight of the bloodshed and suffering weighed heavily on Ashoka's conscience. Witnessing the horrors he had caused, Ashoka experienced a profound change. The cries of widows and orphan children haunted him, leading him to reflect on his actions. Overcome with guilt, he asked himself, "What have I done?" This moment of awakening transformed him from a conqueror into a seeker of peace. Ashoka turned to Buddhism, seeking solace and redemption, and embraced the teachings of Buddha, renouncing violence and adopting the principles of Dharma, righteousness, compassion, and non-violence. Determined to rule with justice and wisdom, Ashoka dedicated his life to promoting peace. He abolished the death penalty, encouraged religious tolerance, and established hospitals and schools throughout his empire, embodying the values of compassion and enlightenment. He banned animal sacrifices and protected wildlife for the welfare of his people, advocating compassion towards all living beings. His transformation inspired his subjects, and his reign ushered in a golden age of prosperity, peace, and cultural growth. To spread his message of peace and morality, he erected monumental pillars and rock edicts throughout his empire. These inscriptions, written in Prakrit and Brahmi script, outlined his policies, moral teachings, and guidance for his people. They emphasized ethical governance, respect for all religions, and social harmony, urging kindness, generosity, and non-violence. He encouraged his people to live virtuous lives, respect their parents and teachers, and practice tolerance and understanding. The most famous of these pillars, the lion capital of Asoka at Sarnath, later became India's national emblem. The chakra wheel on the Indian flag symbolizes Ashoka's message of justice and righteousness. Ashoka sent Buddhist missionaries to distant lands, spreading the teachings of Buddha to Sri Lanka, Central Asia, Egypt, and Greece. He supported the construction of monasteries, viharas, and stupas, including the magnificent Sanchi Stupa, a testament to his devotion to peace. Under his patronage, Buddhism flourished and spread across Asia, influencing cultures, philosophies, and civilizations. His vision of moral governance and religious tolerance inspired future leaders, philosophers, and spiritual seekers. Ashoka ruled for over 40 years, transforming the Maurya Empire into a realm of prosperity and harmony. His legacy is not measured by the lands he conquered, but by the hearts he touched. He is remembered as Ashoka the Great, the ruler who chose peace over power and compassion over conquest. His Dharma chakra became a symbol of justice and truth, inspiring generations to seek wisdom and righteousness. After his death, the Maurya Empire gradually declined, but his message of peace endured. His legacy transcended time and borders, influencing spiritual and political leaders worldwide. As our journey through Ashoka's world concludes, remember the man who transformed from a fierce conqueror into a beacon of compassion. His famous quote, "The only true conquest is the conquest of the self," reflects his enduring legacy, one not in monuments of stone, but in the ideals of peace, justice, and love for all beings. Tonight, let the spirit of Ashoka the Great guide your dreams, filling them with compassion, wisdom, and the courage to choose peace. Sweet dreams, traveller of historical wonders. Charlemagne, the father of Europe, was a warrior king who united Western Europe and laid the foundations of the Holy Roman Empire. His story is one of courage, vision, and leadership, a tale of a ruler who dreamed of a united Christendom and whose influence shaped Europe's future. Born in 747 AD, Charlemagne was the son of Pepin the Short, king of the Franks and a descendant of the powerful Carolingian dynasty. Despite the mystery surrounding his early years, Charlemagne became a formidable leader. In 768 AD, upon his father's death, Charlemagne inherited the Frankish kingdom with his brother Carloman. However, tensions between them led to division, and Charlemagne became the sole ruler when Carloman unexpectedly died. With unparalleled ambition, Charlemagne expanded his kingdom, aiming to restore the Roman Empire's glory. His reign marked a turning point in history. A brave military leader, Charlemagne waged numerous campaigns, conquering the Lombards in Italy and securing the Papal States' protection. He also fought a brutal 30-year war against the Saxons, determined to convert them to Christianity. His efforts included the infamous massacre of Verdun, where thousands of Saxons were executed, but eventually the Saxons became loyal subjects. Charlemagne also defeated the Avars in Central Europe, expanded his empire to the Danube, and waged campaigns in Spain against the Moors. His conquests led to the creation of a united Christian empire spanning Western Europe, from the Pyrenees to the Danube, and from the North Sea to Italy. On Christmas Day, 800 AD, Charlemagne was crowned Emperor of the Romans by Pope Leo III in a moment that symbolized the revival of the Western Roman Empire. This coronation established the Holy Roman Empire, marking the beginning of a lasting alliance between the Frankish monarchy and the Catholic Church, which shaped European politics and religion for centuries. Charlemagne's vision was not merely one of conquest, but of unity. He aspired to build a Christian empire where faith and knowledge could flourish, binding his subjects under one God and one ruler. Charlemagne was not only a warrior, but also a visionary who valued education and culture, determined to revive the legacy of the Roman Empire. Is this conversation helpful so far? Charlemagne sparked the Carolingian Renaissance, a revival of art, literature, and education within his empire. He welcomed scholars from across Europe, including Alcuin of York, to his court at Aachen, turning it into a hub for intellectual activity. Charlemagne founded schools in monasteries and cathedrals, focusing on Latin literature and theology. Under his patronage, manuscripts were copied and preserved, safeguarding ancient knowledge for future generations. He introduced a new writing system, Carolingian minuscule, a clear and legible script that influenced modern European writing. Charlemagne himself was a lifelong learner, studying Latin and Greek and encouraging his children to pursue education. He believed that knowledge was essential for effective governance and the spread of Christianity. As a just and wise ruler, Charlemagne reformed the legal system, establishing standardized laws across his empire. He issued decrees known as capitularies that governed justice, administration, and religious practices. He protected the poor and weak, enforced Christian morality, and promoted social welfare. To ensure loyalty, Charlemagne appointed local rulers called counts to administer justice, collect taxes, and maintain order. He also sent royal envoys, the missi dominici, to oversee local governance. His reforms helped stabilize his empire, fostering unity and prosperity for his subjects. Charlemagne's vision of governance centered on order, justice, and faith. Charlemagne ruled for 46 years, transforming Western Europe into a united and powerful Christian empire. His legacy as the father of Europe endures as his actions laid the groundwork for modern European nations and influenced politics, religion, and culture. After his death in 814 AD, his empire was divided among his grandsons, leading to the formation of France, Germany, and Italy. However, Charlemagne's dream of a unified Christendom continued to inspire future leaders, including the Holy Roman Emperors and Napoleon Bonaparte. His influence on education, law, and governance shaped the medieval world and contributed to the Renaissance. His name was immortalized in the Song of Roland, a medieval epic that celebrated his deeds. Charlemagne's legacy is one of unity, justice, and knowledge, embodying the spirit of a ruler who sought to change the world. Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, ruled an empire that became a golden age of prosperity, culture, and exploration. Her story is one of courage, intellect, and resilience, a journey of a woman who rose above political intrigue and personal danger to become one of history's most iconic monarchs. Born on September 7th, 1533 to King Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, her birth was initially seen as a disappointment, as her father desired a male heir. After her mother's execution, Elizabeth was declared illegitimate, and her future became uncertain. Despite these challenges, Elizabeth proved to be highly intelligent and well-educated, mastering Latin, Greek, French, Italian, and various subjects under renowned tutors. Her political instincts sharpened as she navigated her perilous situation. Her early life was fraught with danger. After her father's numerous marriages, her half-sister Mary became queen. Mary saw Elizabeth as a threat and imprisoned her in the Tower of London, accusing her of treason. Elizabeth narrowly escaped death, relying on courage and diplomacy. In 1558, Elizabeth ascended to the throne at 25, facing a divided kingdom and a financial crisis. Despite these challenges, she proved to be a skilled political leader, establishing the Elizabethan religious settlement, which created the Church of England as a compromise between Catholicism and Protestantism. Her decision to remain unmarried earned her the title Virgin Queen, as she prioritized England's power and independence over political alliances. Her reign, known as the Elizabethan era, marked a golden age of culture, exploration, and prosperity. In 1588, when faced with the Spanish Armada, Elizabeth rallied her people with a legendary speech at Tilbury, where she famously declared, "I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king. Her forces, outnumbered and facing imminent danger, fought valiantly, and through brilliant naval strategy and determination, the English navy triumphed, securing England's independence. The fleet triumphed over the Armada, marking one of the most significant military victories in history. This victory ensured England's independence, established it as a formidable naval power, and fueled national pride. Elizabeth's reign was marked by an extraordinary cultural revival, giving birth to the Elizabethan era of literature, art, and music. She was a great patron of the arts, supporting playwrights, poets, and musicians who produced masterpieces that shaped English culture. William Shakespeare rose as the era's greatest playwright, creating timeless works like Hamlet, Macbeth, and Romeo and Juliet. Christopher Marlowe and Edmund Spenser also thrived, enriching English literature with their poetic brilliance. The courtly dances, music, and elaborate pageants celebrated the grandeur of her reign, while the Globe Theatre became a cultural hub, attracting diverse audiences eager to experience the magic of drama. Elizabeth herself was a skilled poet and musician, celebrated for her wit, eloquence, and charm. Her court became a centre of intellectual and artistic brilliance. Under her rule, England undertook bold exploratory voyages, laying the foundation for the British Empire. She granted charters to explorers like Sir Francis Drake, who became the first Englishman to circumnavigate the globe, bringing wealth and glory to the country. Sir Walter Raleigh established the first English colony in North America, naming it Virginia in her honour. Trade flourished, and England's influence expanded, challenging the dominance of Spain and Portugal. These voyages of discovery expanded the world's knowledge, paving the way for future empires and global trade networks. Elizabeth ruled for 45 years, guiding England through religious upheavals, foreign threats, and economic challenges. Her leadership brought stability, prosperity, and cultural brilliance, marking the Elizabethan age as one of the most remarkable periods in English history. She passed away on March 24, 1603, at Richmond Palace, passing the throne to James I of Scotland, uniting England and Scotland under one crown. Her death marked the end of the Tudor dynasty, but her legacy lived on. She was remembered as Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, who ruled with wisdom, strength, and grace. Her reign inspired poets, artists, and historians who immortalized her in literature and legend. As we conclude our journey through her world, let's reflect on the Queen who defied the odds and ruled with brilliance. She once said, "I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king." Her legacy lives not only in the empire she built, but also in the spirit of courage, wisdom, and independence she inspired. Let her spirit guide your dreams, filling them with resilience, vision, and the courage to defy expectations. Sweet dreams, traveller of history. Napoleon Bonaparte, the emperor who dreamed of glory, was born on August 15, 1769, on the island of Corsica, shortly after it became a French territory. His family was of minor Italian nobility but lacked wealth. From a young age, Napoleon was determined to rise above his humble beginnings. Sent to France to study at the Royal Military School, he excelled in subjects like mathematics, history, and military strategy. At 16, he became a second lieutenant in the artillery. Driven by ambition and a desire for greatness, he was fiercely intelligent, disciplined, and had an unyielding will to succeed. As the French Revolution unfolded, Napoleon's commitment to its ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity shaped his political vision, yet he saw the turmoil as an opportunity to rise. His military career soared when he defended the revolutionary government during the siege of Toulon in 1793. His brilliant artillery tactics earned him the rank of brigadier general at just 24. He continued to climb the ranks, leading an audacious campaign in Italy in 1796. His unmatched strategic brilliance led to the defeat of the Austrian forces, securing French control over northern Italy. His soldiers adored him, affectionately calling him Le Petit Caporal, the little corporal, due to his courage and leadership. Returning to France as a hero, Napoleon launched the Egyptian campaign in 1798, aiming to disrupt British trade routes. Although his fleet was destroyed by Admiral Nelson at the Battle of the Nile, Napoleon made significant scientific discoveries, including the Rosetta Stone, which unlocked the secrets of Egyptian hieroglyphs. Amid political corruption and economic crisis in France, Napoleon seized the opportunity to stage a coup on November 9, 1799, overthrowing the Directory and establishing the consulate, with himself as first consul. He declared, "I found the crown of France lying on the ground, and I picked it up with my sword." With his charismatic leadership and political acumen, he restored order, stability, and prosperity to France. In 1704, he crowned himself Emperor of the French in a grand ceremony at Notre Dame Cathedral, symbolizing his supremacy and independence from the Church. Thus began the Age of Napoleon, with a series of military campaigns that would shape Europe and the modern world. As the Napoleonic Wars expanded his empire across Europe, Napoleon triumphed over Austria and Russia at the Battle of Austerlitz in 1805, a victory that earned him the title Master of Europe. He defeated Prussia at the Battle of Jena and occupied Berlin in 1807, later signing the Treaty of Tilsit with Tsar Alexander I of Russia, dividing Europe between them. His empire stretched from Spain to Poland, dominating the continent. He introduced the Napoleonic Code, a legal system that abolished feudal privileges and promoted civil rights, influencing legal frameworks worldwide. However, his ambition led to the disastrous Peninsular War in Spain and the ill-fated Russian campaign of 1812. The harsh winter and scorched earth tactics devastated his grand army, marking the beginning of his downfall. After retreating from Russia, he faced a coalition of European powers united against him. At the Battle of Leipzig in 1813, he was defeated and forced to abdicate in 1814, exiled to the island of Elba. He plotted his return and, in 1815, escaped Elba and marched back to Paris for the 100 Days, reclaiming his throne. However, his return was short-lived. At the Battle of Waterloo, he faced the combined forces of Britain and Prussia and was defeated by Duke of Wellington. His empire crumbled and he was exiled to St. Helena, a remote island in the South Atlantic, where he spent his final years reflecting on his legacy. On May 5, 1821, Napoleon passed away, reportedly whispering his last words, "France, Army, Head of the Army, Josephine." Napoleon's impact on history is immense. He modernized France's administration, economy, and education, and his Napoleonic Code became the foundation for legal systems across Europe and Latin America. His military strategies are studied by generals today and have inspired leaders from Wellington to Eisenhower. His vision of a united Europe played a role in the creation of the European Union. However, his ambition also led to devastating wars that left millions dead. He was both a hero and a conqueror, a visionary and a tyrant. His complex legacy defies simple judgment. As we conclude our journey through Napoleon's world, reflect on the man who once dreamed of empire. He famously said, "Impossible is a word found only in the dictionary of fools." His legacy lies not only in the lands he conquered, but in the spirit of ambition and determination he inspired. Let his spirit guide your dreams tonight, filling them with courage, ambition, and the drive to shape your destiny. Cyrus the Great, King of Kings, takes us next through his remarkable life and legacy. A visionary ruler who founded the Persian Empire and became one of history's most revered leaders. His story is one of conquest, justice, and wisdom. A tale of a king who built an empire through not just strength, but tolerance and diplomacy. Close your eyes and step into a world of golden palaces and vast deserts where Cyrus's name became synonymous with greatness. Born around 600 BC in Persia, modern-day Iran, he was a member of the Achaemenid dynasty, the son of King Cambyses I and grandson of a powerful Median ruler. Legend tells that before his birth, his grandfather, King Astyages of Media, had a terrifying dream that Cyrus would overthrow him. To prevent this, he ordered the infant's death, but a kind-hearted herdsman secretly raised Cyrus, who grew up strong, intelligent, and fearless. As a young man, he proved his leadership skills and, when the time came, rose against his grandfather, uniting the Persian and Median peoples. This was the beginning of an empire that would change history. Cyrus was not just a warrior, but a brilliant strategist and diplomat. After uniting Persia and Media, he expanded his dominion, using disciplined and innovative tactics that gave him an advantage over his enemies. His first major conquest was the Lydian kingdom in 546 BC, ruled by the wealthy King Croesus, famous for his immense riches. Despite Cyrus's powerful army, he outmaneuvered Croesus and captured his capital, Sardis. Instead of executing Croesus, Cyrus spared him, showing mercy and wisdom. He then turned eastward, subduing vast territories across Central Asia to ensure his empire's security and stability. But his greatest conquest came in 539 BC, when he targeted the Babylonian Empire, ruled by King Nabonidus. Babylon, one of the greatest cities of the ancient world, was believed to be impenetrable, surrounded by massive walls and the great Euphrates River. However, Cyrus, a master strategist, diverted the river, lowering its water levels so his army could enter through the riverbed. The city fell without a major battle. Instead of destruction, Cyrus declared himself a liberator. His rule was unique. He freed the enslaved Jewish people and allowed them to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple, an act recorded in both the Bible and the Cyrus Cylinder, one of the first declarations of human rights. Throughout history, his respect for various cultures and religions distinguished him as a ruler known for his wisdom and compassion. Cyrus's most enduring legacy is the Cyrus Cylinder, an ancient clay tablet bearing his proclamations. It outlines his policies of religious tolerance, freedom for enslaved people, and fair governance. Unlike other conquerors who imposed their beliefs on those they ruled, Cyrus respected local customs and religions, allowing conquered people to retain their traditions, which helped maintain loyalty and stability within his empire. This legacy of tolerance and justice earned him the admiration of future generations. Today, the United Nations recognizes the Cyrus Cylinder as an early symbol of human rights and governance. Cyrus continued expanding his empire until his final campaign against the might a fierce nomadic tribe in Central Asia. According to legend, their queen, Tamiris, challenged him in battle, seeking vengeance for the death of her son at the hands of the Persians. A brutal battle ensued, and Cyrus fell in combat around 530 BC. Some accounts claim he was killed on the battlefield, while others suggest he died from wounds sustained in the battle. Regardless of the manner of his death, his name remains forever etched in history as one of the greatest rulers of all time. His body was laid to rest in a simple yet elegant tomb in Pasargadae, his capital city. The tomb remains a sacred site, a testament to his enduring legacy. Cyrus's empire, known as the Achaemenid Empire, became the largest the world had ever seen, stretching from the Indus River to the Aegean Sea. His successors, including Darius the Great and Xerxes I, continued his vision, shaping the course of history. His model of governance, tolerance, respect, and fair administration inspired countless leaders, from Alexander the Great to the founding fathers of the United States. His ideas on religious freedom and human rights remain relevant even today. The Persian people revere him as the father of Persia, marking the beginning of one of history's most influential empires, one that shaped art, science, politics, and philosophy for generations to come. As we conclude our journey through Cyrus's world, take a moment to reflect on the king who ruled with justice, strength, and wisdom. He once said, "I am Cyrus, king of the world." His legacy is not only in the lands he conquered, but in the ideals of fairness, unity, and tolerance that still inspire the world today. Let the spirit of Cyrus the Great guide your dreams tonight, filling them with courage, wisdom, and the vision to lead with justice. Sweet dreams, dear traveller, of historical wonders. The first emperor of Rome, Augustus, transformed Rome from a crumbling republic into a mighty empire. His life story is one of political brilliance, military strategy, and a vision that shaped the Western world. Close your eyes and enter a world of grand marble temples, fierce battles, and the rise of the Roman Empire. Born Gaius Octavius in 63 BC into a wealthy yet relatively unremarkable family, his fortunes dramatically changed when his great-uncle, Julius Caesar, adopted him as his son and named him heir to his vast political and military power. After Caesar's assassination in 44 BC, the Roman Republic was thrown into chaos. At just 18 years old, Octavian claimed his inheritance. Though few took him seriously at first, his cunning, patience, and determination soon made him a formidable force in Roman politics. To solidify his power, Octavian formed the Second Triumvirate with Mark Antony and Lepidus, a political alliance that would dominate Rome for years. Together, they hunted down Caesar's assassins, Brutus and Cassius, culminating in their defeat at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BC. However, the alliance was never meant to last. Over time, tensions grew between Octavian and Antony, especially as Antony became entangled with Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt. Octavian seized the opportunity to portray Antony as a traitor under Cleopatra's spell. In 31 BC, their rivalry led to the Battle of Actium, where Octavian's fleet, commanded by Agrippa, decisively defeated Antony and Cleopatra's forces. The lovers fled to Egypt, where they took their own lives. With his last great rival gone, Octavian became the undisputed master of Rome. In 27 BC, he took the name Augustus, meaning the revered one, and instead of declaring himself a dictator, he cleverly maintained the illusion of the republic while holding supreme power. The Senate granted him nearly limitless authority, making him Rome's first emperor. Under his rule, Rome entered an era of unprecedented stability and prosperity known as the Pax Romana, which lasted for over 200 years. Augustus reformed the military, established a professional bureaucracy, improved infrastructure, and promoted the arts and literature. He famously boasted, "I found Rome a city of bricks and left it a city of marble." His architectural projects included the Pantheon, the Areopagus, and the Forum of Augustus, all symbols of his lasting legacy. Augustus ruled for over 40 years, guiding Rome through its transformation into an empire. He carefully managed his image as the princeps, first citizen, avoiding the fate of his great-uncle Julius Caesar, who was assassinated for seeking too much power. Augustus died at the age of 75 and was buried in his mausoleum. The Senate later declared him a god, and he was worshipped as Divus Augustus. His legacy continued far beyond his death, as every succeeding emperor adopted the titles Caesar or Augustus. His reforms left a lasting impact on Rome, influencing the empire for centuries. His name still echoes today in the month of August. As we conclude this exploration of his world, reflect on the man who transformed Rome into an empire. He once said, "Festina lente," make haste, slowly. His deliberate strategic ascent to power helped ensure Rome's stability and endurance, showing that true leadership relies on patience, vision, and steadfast resolve. May his spirit inspire your dreams tonight, filling them with insight, ambition, and the bravery to shape your own path. Louis XIV, known for his long and transformative reign, reshaped France into a powerful and grand nation. His story is one of absolute rule, opulence, and a guiding vision that altered the nation's destiny. Imagine a realm of gilded palaces and lavish courts led by a monarch who called himself the Sun King. Born on September 5th, 1638 to King Louis XIII and Anne of Austria, his birth was seen as a divine gift after years of his parents' struggle to conceive. At just 5 years old, following his father's death, Louis became king. However, actual control rested with his mother and Cardinal Mazarin, who served as regent. During his early years, civil unrest, known as the Fronde, taught him a vital lesson: allow the monarchy's authority to be undermined. When Mazarin died in 1661, the 22-year-old Louis took full control, famously declaring, "L'État, c'est moi," I am the state. He consolidated power, weakened the nobility's influence, and overhauled administration, military, and economic structures, aided by Minister Jean-Baptiste Colbert. He enforced religious uniformity by revoking the Edict of Nantes, compelling Protestants to convert or flee. Believing in divine right, Louis styled himself as the Sun King, placing himself at the center of the nation. He converted a hunting lodge into the magnificent palace of Versailles, turning it into the political and social heart of France. The palace, with its hall of mirrors, vast gardens, and elaborate decor, symbolized his absolute rule and ensured the loyalty of the nobility through a culture of spectacle and ceremony. Versailles was more than a residence, it was a reflection of his grand vision. Louis sought to expand French territory and assert dominance through wars such as the War of Devolution, the Franco-Dutch War, and the War of the Spanish Succession. Although these efforts enhanced France's standing, they strained its finances and populace. The Treaty of Utrecht in 1713 limited his ambitions by preventing a union with Spain. Despite setbacks, he positioned France as a dominant European power, influencing diplomacy, culture, and military affairs for generations. After a reign of 72 years, Louis XIV died on September 1st, 1715. His era marked France's golden age, distinguished by cultural flourishing and artistic excellence. He supported talents like Molière, Racine, and Lully, elevating French culture. His model of absolute monarchy inspired other rulers, though his extravagant spending and continuous wars sowed seeds of future turmoil. Less than a century later, revolution would challenge the very monarchy he had exemplified. As this journey through his world concludes, remember the king whose reign embodied grandeur. He once asked, "Has God forgotten all I have done for him?" His name became a symbol of absolute rule, his palace a monument to his ambition, and his legacy a defining chapter in history. May his spirit fill your dreams tonight with ambition, grace, and the pursuit of greatness. A formidable monarch whose reign transformed England's history, his story is one of power, ambition, and change, a tale of a king who defied the Pope, established a new church, and left behind a legacy of both grandeur and controversy. Imagine stepping into a world of royal courts, political intrigue, and a ruler whose 6 marriages became legendary. Born on June 28, 1491, Henry VII was the second son of Henry VII and Elizabeth of York. As a child, he was never expected to be king, with his older brother Arthur being the heir. However, when Arthur died unexpectedly in 1502, Henry's fate changed. Raised in an environment rich with learning, music, and physical training, Henry excelled in languages, theology, and philosophy, mastering several languages and embracing Renaissance humanism. He was also a skilled athlete, excelling in jousting, hunting, and tennis, presenting himself as a capable and strong ruler. At just 17, Henry was crowned king in 1509 and married his brother's widow, Catherine of Aragon, to solidify an alliance with Spain. Handsome, athletic, and intelligent, he epitomized the ideal Renaissance king. His reign began with great promise, but his relentless desire for power and a male heir soon defined his rule. For years, Henry's marriage to Catherine of Aragon only produced one surviving child, Mary, but no son to inherit the throne. Frustrated and convinced that God was punishing him for marrying his brother's widow, Henry sought an annulment from the Pope. When Pope Clement VII refused, due to political pressures from Catherine's nephew, Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, Henry grew increasingly upset. The Pope's refusal led to one of the most significant religious upheavals in history. Determined to act on his own, Henry, with the help of his advisor Thomas Cromwell, declared himself the supreme head of the Church of England in 1534, breaking from the Catholic Church. This act, known as the English Reformation, not only allowed him to remarry, but also resulted in the dissolution of monasteries, the redistribution of their wealth, and a shift in English governance and religion. Henry's actions caused deep divisions across Europe, reshaping both England's spiritual and political landscape, with the monarchy at the centre of religious authority. Henry's 6 marriages had a profound impact on both his personal life and England's future. His wives had different fates, each contributing to his quest for a male heir. Catherine of Aragon was divorced after more than 20 years when Henry's obsession with a son led to the annulment of their marriage. She remained devoted to her faith and daughter Mary, but was exiled and died in obscurity. Anne Boleyn, his second wife, was executed in 1536 after failing to give him a son, accused of adultery, treason and incest, leaving behind their daughter Elizabeth. Jane Seymour, his third wife, gave him his long-awaited son, Edward VI, but died shortly after childbirth. Henry considered her his true wife and was later buried beside her. Anne of Cleves, his fourth wife, had a political marriage arranged by Cromwell, but Henry found her unattractive, and the marriage was annulled after just 6 months. Catherine Howard, his fifth wife, was executed for adultery in 1542, echoing Anne Boleyn's tragic fate. His final wife, Catherine Parr, was a wise woman who reconciled Henry with his daughters and outlived him, later remarrying. As Henry aged, his once athletic body grew bloated, and his temper became more erratic. A jousting injury left him in constant pain, and he suffered from obesity and ulcers, which made his later years increasingly difficult. Despite his declining health, he ruled with absolute authority, quelling rebellions and enforcing religious reforms. His lavish spending, fueled by the wealth from dissolved monasteries, led to economic instability. Henry died on January 28, 1547, at the age of 55, and was succeeded by his son, Edward VI, whose reign was short. After Edward's death, Mary briefly ruled, followed by Elizabeth, who ushered in England's golden age. Henry's reign left an indelible mark on England. His break with the Catholic Church, the dissolution of the monasteries, and the establishment of the Church of England had lasting political and religious effects. His creation of a powerful navy set the stage for England's maritime dominance in the centuries to come. His rule was a mix of admiration and controversy. On one hand, he was a patron of the arts, a scholar, and a powerful leader. On the other, he was seen as a tyrant prone to cruelty and excess. Though he failed to secure a stable line of succession, his daughter, Elizabeth I, would go on to become one of England's greatest monarchs, proving that Henry's legacy extended far beyond his own reign. Once he remarked that his end was near, yet he was content, for he had fulfilled his duty. His reign was marked by both triumph and turmoil, leaving a lasting imprint on history. Tonight, let the spirit of Henry VII inspire your dreams, filling them with ambition, resilience, and the echoes of a world forever altered. Sweet dreams, dear traveller of historical wonders. Peter the Great, the Tsar who reshaped Russia, led a life of ambition, reform, and unwavering determination. His journey took Russia from stagnation into the modern world, transforming it into a powerful empire. Born in 1672 to Tsar Alexis III and his second wife, Natalia Narishkina, Peter was a curious and energetic child, though his early life was filled with political instability. Following his father's death, Peter's half-brother Fedor III ascended the throne, but his poor health led to a power struggle between rival factions. After Fedor's passing, Peter's half-sister Sophia, backed by the Miloslavsky faction, took power as regent, ruling in the name of young Peter and his sickly half-brother Ivan. But Peter's supporters waited for the right moment, and in 1689, at just 17 years old, Peter deposed Sophia and became the undisputed ruler of Russia. Unlike previous Tsars, Peter was deeply interested in European innovations, determined to modernize his country. He embarked on a 2-year journey across Western Europe, visiting the Netherlands, England, and Austria, studying shipbuilding, military tactics, and European customs. He returned with ideas that would forever change Russia, implementing sweeping reforms. Peter modernized the army, introducing European tactics and weaponry, and established Russia's first navy. He pushed the nobility to adopt Western customs, even going so far as to personally shave their beards. His reforms extended to the government, where he reduced the power of traditional nobility and introduced a merit-based system. He also brought the Orthodox Church under state control. Though his reforms were radical and often met with resistance, his unyielding determination ensured their success. One of Peter's greatest ambitions was to secure access to the Baltic Sea for trade and expansion, leading to the Great Northern War, 1700 to 1721, against Sweden, a major European power. Despite early setbacks, Peter reorganized his forces, and in 1709 Russia dealt Sweden a decisive defeat at the Battle of Poltava. By the war's end, the Treaty of Nystad, 1721, granted Russia vast territories along the Baltic, solidifying its status as a major European power. To mark this triumph, Peter took the title of Emperor of all Russia, transforming his domain into a true empire. In 1703, Peter founded St. Petersburg on the banks of the Neva River, a city built by forced labor that would serve as a symbol of his vision. Designed to rival Europe's great cities, it featured grand boulevards, canals, and palatial structures. St. Petersburg became Russia's window to the West and the capital of the empire in 1712, shifting power from the conservative stronghold of Moscow. Peter's drive for modernization often came with harsh measures. He crushed revolts with brutal force, curbed the independence of the nobility, and demanded absolute loyalty. Even his family was not exempt. His son Alexei, who opposed his reforms, was arrested, tortured, and died in captivity, possibly at Peter's orders. Despite his harsh methods, Peter's vision for Russia remained steadfast. He worked tirelessly, personally overseeing projects and learning trades, pushing the country toward greatness. Peter died in 1725, likely from a bladder infection after rescuing sailors from a freezing river. His death marked the end of an era, but his legacy lived on. He expanded Russia's borders, making it one of the largest empires in the world, revolutionized the military, and introduced Western ideals that brought Russia into the modern age. His beloved city, St. Petersburg, endures as a testament to his vision. Though Peter ruled with an iron fist, his impact on Russia was undeniable. He transformed a backward medieval kingdom into a European powerhouse, laying the foundation for centuries of Russian dominance. As we reflect on his legacy, take one final look at the Tsar who defied stagnation. He once said, "I have conquered an empire, but I have not been able to conquer myself." His brilliance, determination, and sheer willpower reshaped Russia forever. Tonight, may the spirit of Peter the Great guide your dreams, filling them with ambition, resilience, and the courage to embrace change. Sweet dreams, dear traveller. Traveller of historical wonders, King Solomon, the wisest of all kings. Let us explore the life and legacy of the ruler whose wisdom, wealth, and power became legendary. His story is one of divine gifts, monumental constructions, and timeless proverbs, a tale of a king who sought understanding above all. Close your eyes and enter a realm of golden palaces, sacred temples, and the wisdom that shaped an empire. Solomon was born around 990 BC to King David and Bathsheba. His birth followed a controversial chapter in Israel's history, as Bathsheba had once been the wife of Uriah before David's intervention. Despite this, Solomon was chosen as David's heir, bypassing his older brothers. As David's health declined, a power struggle erupted, with Solomon's brother Adonijah attempting to seize the throne. However, with the support of the prophet Nathan and Solomon's mother, David declared Solomon as his rightful successor in a grand ceremony. Solomon was anointed king, solidifying his position as Israel's ruler. After ascending to the throne, Solomon had a dream in which God offered to grant him anything he desired. Instead of asking for wealth or power, Solomon humbly requested wisdom to govern his people justly. Pleased with Solomon's selflessness, God granted him unparalleled wisdom, along with wealth and honor beyond measure. Solomon's intelligence became legendary, drawing rulers and scholars from distant lands who sought his counsel. One of his most renowned judgments involved two women claiming to be the mother of the same child. In a test of true maternal love, Solomon proposed to cut the child in half, knowing that the real mother would rather surrender her child than see him harmed. His wise verdict cemented his reputation as a just and discerning ruler. One of Solomon's most remarkable achievements was the construction of the first temple in Jerusalem, fulfilling his father David's dream of providing a permanent home for the Ark of the Covenant. This magnificent temple, adorned with gold, cedar wood, and sacred carvings, was designed to honor God and unite the people of Israel. The project took 7 years to complete, using materials from all corners of the known world, including Lebanon's famed cedars and vast amounts of gold and precious stones. The temple became the spiritual center of Israel, a place of pilgrimage and divine worship for generations. Under Solomon's reign, Israel flourished, becoming a hub of trade and diplomacy. His immense wealth allowed for grand architectural projects, and his influence reached across the ancient world. One of the most famous events during his reign was the visit of the Queen of Sheba, a mysterious ruler from a distant land, possibly Ethiopia or Arabia. Intrigued by tales of Solomon's wisdom, she brought lavish gifts of spices, gold, and jewels to test his intelligence. After witnessing his wisdom firsthand and marveling at the splendor of his court, she declared that Solomon's greatness exceeded even the rumors she had heard. Their meeting became a symbol of knowledge, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. Despite his legendary wisdom, Solomon's later years were marred by excess and spiritual decline. He married hundreds of wives and concubines, many from foreign nations who worshipped different gods. Under their influence, Solomon allowed the construction of temples dedicated to pagan deities, straying from his devotion to God. As a result, God foretold that Solomon's kingdom would be divided after his death. While Israel remained prosperous during his reign, internal conflict and resentment grew among his people. Solomon ruled for 40 years, but upon his death, his empire fractured. His son, Rehoboam, inherited the throne, but his harsh rule led to rebellion, dividing the kingdom into Israel in the north and Judah in the south. Though Solomon's kingdom fractured, his legacy endured. He is credited with writing much of the book of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the poetic Song of Solomon, works that continue to inspire and guide people today. His temple, though later destroyed, remained a symbol of faith and devotion. The wisdom attributed to him became a model for just leadership, and his name remains synonymous with insight, judgment, and understanding. Solomon's story serves as a reminder that wisdom is the greatest treasure, but even the wisest among us must guard against the temptations of power and wealth. As we conclude our journey through Solomon's world, take one final glance at the king who sought wisdom above all else. He once said, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge." His reign was one of grandeur and enlightenment, but also a cautionary tale of excess and human frailty. Let the spirit of King Solomon guide your dreams, filling them with wisdom, understanding, and the pursuit of a just heart. Sweet dreams, dear traveller, of historical wonders. Cleopatra's legacy is one of resilience, power, and intelligence. Born in 69 BC to the ruling Ptolemaic dynasty, a Greek family that had governed Egypt since Alexander the Great, she stood out by embracing Egyptian culture, even learning the native language, a rarity among the Greek rulers of Egypt. Her father, Ptolemy XII, was an unpopular ruler, and upon his death, Cleopatra ascended the throne at 18, ruling alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. However, palace intrigue and power struggles soon led to Cleopatra's exile. Unwilling to be defeated, she seized the opportunity in 48 BC when Julius Caesar, Rome's most powerful general, arrived in Egypt amid the kingdom's turmoil. Seeking his support, Cleopatra famously had herself smuggled into Caesar's chambers, rolled in a carpet. With Caesar's backing, she defeated her brother's forces, and Ptolemy XIII drowned in the Nile while trying to escape. Cleopatra was restored to the throne, ruling alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIV. Cleopatra and Caesar became lovers, and in 47 BC she gave birth to their son Caesarion. She travelled to Rome with him, solidifying their alliance. After Caesar's assassination in 44 BC, Cleopatra returned to Egypt, uncertain about the future. Rome descended into civil war, and two men, Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, and Mark Antony, one of Caesar's trusted generals, emerged as dominant figures. Cleopatra allied with Antony, meeting him in 41 BC under legendary circumstances. She arrived on a grand barge, dressed as the goddess Aphrodite, captivating Antony with her charm. Their relationship was both romantic and political, with Cleopatra needing Antony's support to maintain Egypt's independence, and he requiring her wealth to fund his campaigns. Together, they ruled as a formidable pair, having 3 children and creating a powerful alliance that threatened Rome. In Rome, Octavian portrayed Cleopatra as a scheming seductress who had bewitched Antony to undermine Rome. The rivalry between Octavian and Antony escalated into war, culminating in the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, where their fleet was defeated. Fleeing to Egypt, Antony and Cleopatra made a final stand. When Antony believed Cleopatra had already died, he took his own life, and when Cleopatra found him dying, she held him as he passed. Octavian, determined to capture Cleopatra and parade her through Rome, eventually led his forces into Egypt. Rather than suffer such humiliation, Cleopatra chose to end her own life, famously allowing an asp to bite her. Whether the story is true or not, she died on August 12, 30 BC, at the age of 39. Her death marked the fall of Egypt and the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Cleopatra's legacy endures through her intelligence, political acumen, and strength in a world dominated by men. She was far more than a seductress or pawn in Rome's games. She was a shrewd leader, a brilliant linguist, and a woman who commanded respect. Her story has been immortalized in literature, art, and film, and her name remains a symbol of power, love, and political cunning. Though her empire fell, her legend lives on in the ruins of Alexandria and in the hearts of those who dream of power and destiny. Under the guidance of Junius Rusticus, Marcus Aurelius developed a deep commitment to Stoic philosophy, embracing reason, duty, and self-control. These principles would define his reign. Unlike other rulers raised in luxury, Marcus lived a humble, disciplined, and introspective life. He wore simple clothing, slept on a plain bed, and practiced Stoic teachings, finding contentment through virtue and wisdom. Even in his youth, his philosophical reflections were evident, earning him the nickname Verisim, meaning the most truthful one. In 161 AD, after the death of Antoninus Pius, Marcus ascended to the throne, sharing power with his adopted brother, Lucius Verus. This marked the first time in Roman history that two emperors ruled together, symbolizing unity and stability. Despite their contrasting personalities, Marcus being serious and philosophical, while Lucius was more indulgent, they co-ruled harmoniously. Marcus managed governance and legal affairs, while Lucius led military campaigns in the east. Their reign was soon tested by several crises, including the Parthian War in the east, a devastating plague, and invasions from Germanic tribes along the northern borders. Through these challenges, Marcus demonstrated resilience and leadership, maintaining stability in the empire. Unlike emperors who sought glory through conquest, Marcus ruled with justice, humility, and reason, leading by example and showing compassion, even to his enemies. His meditations reflect his Stoic beliefs, emphasizing acceptance of fate, self-discipline, and the pursuit of virtue over material wealth. These personal reflections, written during military campaigns, were meant only for himself, offering insight into the mind of a philosopher king. For much of his reign, Marcus was consumed by the Marcomannic Wars, a series of brutal conflicts along the northern borders. The Germanic tribes, sensing weakness due to the plague, launched invasions that threatened Italy itself. Despite his philosophical nature, Marcus proved to be a capable military leader, reorganizing the army, leading his troops and securing several hard-won victories. Amidst the grueling battles, he continued his philosophical reflections, reminding himself that suffering was part of life's natural order and that true strength lay in controlling one's emotions. His vision of a united empire also led him to integrate defeated tribes into Roman society, offering land in exchange for loyalty. In 180 AD, while campaigning along the Danube, Marcus fell ill. On his deathbed, he summoned his son Commodus and advised him on ruling with virtue and wisdom. However, Marcus feared that his son lacked the character to rule wisely. Marcus passed away on March 17, 180 AD, marking the end of the Pax Romana, a long period of peace and prosperity. His soldiers mourned the loss of not just their emperor, but a wise and just leader. Commodus inherited the throne, but his corrupt rule led to political instability, signaling the beginning of the Roman Empire's decline. Marcus's legacy endures through his writings and example as the ideal philosopher king. His meditations remain a cornerstone of Stoic philosophy, influencing leaders, scholars, and thinkers throughout history. His teachings on virtue, reason, and acceptance continue to inspire those seeking strength and wisdom in the face of adversity. Remembered as the last of the 5 good emperors, Marcus exemplified the Stoic ideal of a just, rational, and virtuous life. His words resonate with timeless truths, guiding readers on the path to inner peace and self-mastery. His reign was one of courage and contemplation, power tempered by philosophy. As we reflect on Marcus Aurelius's life, let his wisdom guide us, filling our dreams with strength, wisdom, and the pursuit of virtue. Is this conversation helpful so far?